Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Mike Dempsey, and I want to thank you for joining us for the Mastering State Sessions from Reactive to Proactive webinar presented by FiscalNote. Today's topic will focus on how to shift you and your team's government affairs strategy for sessions fast approaching in the new year, specifically through the use of FiscalNote. I'm especially excited that you're joining us for this webinar because I think it sets the stage perfectly for what industry leaders and practitioners like yourselves will be facing in the coming months. As many of you know, government affairs teams and individual stakeholders across industries have been rethinking the way they advocate on behalf of their organizations and companies. The risks created by state and local government actions are increasingly hard to ignore among both established and growing industries. The time to modernize government affairs strategies is now. This webinar will be part of an ongoing series of webinars FiscalNote presents throughout the year on how to modernize your government affairs strategy using best-in-class technology as well as industry-leading thought leadership. We invite you to learn more about FiscalNote after this and are looking forward to your questions at the end of the presentation. The purpose of today's webinar, and the reason many of you are attending today, is to master upcoming state sessions as well as prove why you are indispensable to your organization. The work that you do is truly invaluable to your organizations and your own personal career development. As such, today's webinar will give you the tools and methodology through FiscalNote to create a truly successful, scalable strategy for 2018 and beyond. Our agenda today will focus primarily on how you can master upcoming state legislative sessions using FiscalNote's primary GRM, leverage your own networks and team to more effectively respond to government policy and improve ROI, manage dynamic stakeholder networks that address the volume of your organization's issues, and stay informed on industry-leading best practices. At the conclusion of today's webinar, we'll have a brief Q&A section where you'll be able to submit questions that our panelists will answer. We will be following up at the conclusion of the webinar with a recording for your own personal records, in addition to get your opinion on how much you enjoyed the webinar, as well as get your feedback on FiscalNote. For those of you on the webinar today who are familiar with FiscalNote, we thank you for your commitment and interest in our company's mission. For those of you who are unfamiliar with FiscalNote, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce FiscalNote. We are a technology company with headquarters in DC that actually created the first government relationship management platform, or GRM as we'll call it throughout the webinar. FiscalNote's GRM is the leading solution for government affairs professionals and teams involved in issues management. With over 1,200 clients, FiscalNote seeks to help organizations reinvent influence and show the value of an effective government affairs strategy. Now, joining me today are our two presenters. First is Lillian Bile. Lillian is a strategic account manager with FiscalNote. Lillian brings with her many years of client success and account executive experience, who will be walking us through FiscalNote's GRM and giving us industry standard tips and tricks for how to make the best of sessions throughout her experience with some of our current customers. Also joining me, we have Mark Kavanaugh, who is a business development strategist at FiscalNote. Mark has been instrumental in leading the business development team at FiscalNote and has many years of direct selling and partnership building experience within the education, healthcare, manufacturing, and technology spaces. We're excited to have both of these experts on our webinar today. And just before we dive in fully, I wanted to briefly point out that at the conclusion of today's webinar, we will leave a few minutes for a brief Q&A section. You're welcome to submit questions at any time via the text chat box on your screen. Now with that, let's get started. Today, the political landscape is more complex than ever. New officials, a 24-hour news cycle, regulatory uncertainty, and evolving party priorities have become the new normal. As teams work to put together their strategy for 2018 and beyond, it is critical that they have the resources necessary to make data-driven decisions and collaborate seamlessly for maximum efficiency in the new landscape. Government affairs efforts must begin earlier than they have in the past. As teams seek to be more connected to their issues, technology plays a much larger role than it ever has before. Now, as many of you know, teams are more spread out than ever before across the country, requiring new forms of collaboration. In addition, the issues that individuals and teams are tracking are beginning far earlier than in previous years, oftentimes with just a simple tweet or Facebook post. These local issues soon become national issues at rapid rates, and as a result, teams need to have internal processes to face these challenges. So the question becomes, how can individuals and groups address these challenges in new ways, faster than the competition, and while still taking into account the voice of the constituent and consumer? With all this happening at the national scale, it's important for us to focus and hone into the context for what's happening at the state level in 2018. With the federal level stagnating and the primary focus on a few key legislative battles, more activity will of course occur at the state and local level. With this increase in activity comes entirely new sets of issues that organizations may not have encountered in previous years. 2018 state sessions have already seen a large number of pre-filed bills. In order to truly create a modern state session strategy, monitoring and keeping track of the sheer volume and complexity of these issues is the only way to effectively manage the upcoming deluge of work for you and your organization. As many of you know, work at the state level has changed in the past years. Government affairs work at the state level is a largely mobile, desk-free role that requires sometimes large amounts of travel. With so much of the role done on the road, as well as requiring immense amounts of collaboration across states, it's hypercritical for organizations to realize why going from reactive to proactive is so important. Organizations have traditionally viewed their government affairs teams as a cost center, with only a vague understanding of how or whether the teams have any impact whatsoever on corporate business goals. But in today's increasingly complex business and political environments, the GA function is more consequential than ever, as moving an organization's agenda forward can impact the bottom line in ways unseen before. Government affairs is a business unit with many similarities to both sales and marketing teams on an enterprise model. Responsibilities are distributed across different departments, roles and teams are cross-functional, and resources are pooled for the purposes of maximizing advantage or minimizing risk. Government affairs teams for 2018 state sessions will become even more focused on driving results for the bottom line, and the ability to prove ROI to both internal and external stakeholders is so important. Now, there are many challenges that inevitably hold government affairs teams back from going from reactive to proactive. I've laid out 3 of the primary roadblocks on this slide, but I'm sure many of you have had experiences with other reasons why you feel as though you and your team may be facing challenges during state sessions. The first reason simply deals with the inability to manage the sheer volume and complexity of the many bills that need to be monitored by you and your team and how to prioritize. From this, it's easy to see how the second roadblock is the difficulty in being able to collaborate across states and even within your own team and organization. When you feel as though you're constantly treading water or drinking from a fire hydrant, the need to collaborate and reach for help can be extremely difficult among scattered teams across the country. And finally, another primary roadblock preventing teams from moving into a proactive position has to do with the difficulty in proving ROI. How can a government affairs professional get a seat at the table and prove the value of their work amidst all the chaos of state sessions? If you're not able to advocate for yourself as well as the work you're doing, your commitment and investment into the mission is not at peak performance. And from these challenges comes the need to manage the legislative, regulatory, and reputational needs of government affairs professionals. This is where FiscalNote and FiscalNote's GRM comes in, and what we're going to demonstrate to you today. For years, the old way of advocacy relied on many of the images you see on the left. Spreadsheets to take notes, going to state websites, hiring lobbyists in all 50 states, and knowing the right person to work with or who to engage, and basic searching, bills, and tracking tools. Today, the market has changed, and for the better. Comprehensive full solutions like FiscalNote are reinventing influence and how organizations and individuals are interacting with all levels of government. You can now have a complete one-stop solution in-house to deal with the new political environment ahead. With FiscalNote, look no further than within your own department or practice for a solution to your legislative and regulatory issues. I'd like to now start by breaking down the 3 aforementioned roadblocks and the FiscalNote solution to the problem. The first one we're going to dive into is volume and complexity, or how to deal with the immense number of bills and issues you and your organization are going to have to deal with in the coming months. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lillian from Fiscal Note, who will walk us through the Fiscal Note solution. Lillian?
Thanks, Mike. Many of you might be familiar with using a legislative tracker that provides you email alerts on legislation that you and your organization are following. My controversial statement for today's webinar is that legislative tracking is simply not enough. Traditionally, government affairs teams have relied on some type of legislative tracking tool to monitor changes happening in state governments and in Congress, a reactive strategy that is no match for today's complicated policy environment. Increasing volumes of data, emerging industry disruptors, and an ever-changing regulatory landscape make simple tracking methods simply insufficient. The question becomes, what can I do with all this information once I'm alerted to it? I remember speaking with one client who said that in 1 year, they received legislative tracking alerts from their tracking service for over 25,000 bills. To put that into context, there's probably only around 150,000 bills a year. So these guys are receiving 1 out of every 6 bills introduced. It took their team over 40 hours a week to review all of these pieces of legislation, with most of them being irrelevant. So this is where FiscalNote came in. I'm now going to walk you through how FiscalNote can address this roadblock using examples from the FiscalNote GRM. The images on the left of the following slides are animated videos, or GIFs, to show you the workflow of how an individual user can solve the volume and complexity issue using FiscalNote. Using FiscalNote, you can discover only the relevant pieces of legislation you need for state sessions. Search across FiscalNote's complete historical database of legislation, regulations, legislators, committees, and much more using our search bar located at the top of the FiscalNote application. You can search for keywords, specific bills, regulations, legislators, or committees. FiscalNote allows for the user to delete bills that are irrelevant, only find bills and issues relevant through your own keywords and topics, search for specific bill text, and separate alerts through issue area. No longer will you have to be inundated with erroneous and irrelevant alerts bogging down your inbox. We're not a legislative tracker. We're a technology-driven service that works with you to find only what is relevant to you and your organizations through a rigorous onboarding process and a consultative approach. Once you found a piece of legislation or regulation that's of relevance to you and your organization, create discovery alerts and watch lists to follow only what is of keen interest to you and your group. Discovery alerts are designed to help you discover the most relevant legislative and regulatory information as it occurs during active sessions. Discovery alerts will notify you of newly introduced or revised bills, as well as proposed rules that match your criteria. Watch lists are a place to store groups of bills or regulation dockets that you want to organize or receive updates on. To track a bill throughout its entire legislative life cycle or receive updates on a docket, you simply add it to one of your watch lists. Once these folders have been created, you can sort through and filter these folders and the bills and dockets within them for the most accurate and efficient reporting on the issues that matter to your team. Anytime a change is made on a piece of legislation, you and your team will be alerted in real time, allowing you to align resources and move on the agenda items that your team has tasked you with. It's really not enough to just follow pieces of legislation during sessions. Proactive government affairs teams will follow the legislators and their staff involved in the process throughout the cradle-to-grave life cycle of legislation. With FiscalNote, professionals and teams are given a complete repository of legislator information, ranging from their basic staff contact information all the way to the effectiveness of the legislator using our proprietary analytics. FiscalNote can specifically tell you who is the most effective legislator based on the voting record related to the issue that you and your organization are focusing on. Whether it's transportation, taxes, or healthcare, you'll be able to see who the most effective or least effective legislator that you and your organization should be garnering support from or finding new ways to interface with. In addition, with FiscalNote, you'll be able to stay on top of state policy issues that affect your organization by researching committees and subcommittees that are important to you. Find information on every committee, who its members are, and what upcoming hearings they have, as well as being able to view past hearings. All committee information for all 50 states is available to you with just a few quick clicks. Many times, issues begin with a simple tweet or Facebook post, and eventually they spread across the country, gaining national attention. It's important for your organization to remain proactively engaged with social media to effectively monitor what are top-of-mind priorities for legislators. FiscalNote allows for your organization to search for specific legislator tweets or issues that your organization is moving on. Know who your allies and your enemies are based on what your allies and enemies are discussing. We wanted to present you with a quote from one of our clients to show that FiscalNote is a tested and proven solution to the volume and complexity dilemma that so many state government affairs professionals encounter. By using FiscalNote's GRM, Casey Hill of Energy Solutions was able to learn about the issues affecting his state affiliates and create a comprehensive strategy involving them. Real-time monitoring of the issues that you and your organization care about is critical to running a successful government affairs team. And it's not just enough to be notified of a critical piece of legislation, it's to know what to do with it once you've figured out what is most valuable to you and your team. For Casey Hill of Energy Solutions, FiscalNote provided him the ability to act on state information that had been missing to his team, as well as create a strategy to effectively reinvent influence. With that, Mark Kavanagh is going to walk us through how to solve the second roadblock that many teams encounter, which is the inability to collaborate effectively across states, as well as even across departments. Mark?
Thank you, Lillian. Okay, so let's say you are a state affiliate or a professional tasked with upcoming state sessions. Do you find yourself taking notes hastily on pieces of paper, writing emails and hoping that your colleague reads them in time or even at all in the first place? Relying on texting between you and your team? FiscalNote found from market research that one of the largest roadblocks in creating a proactive state session strategy is the inability to effectively collaborate within a department across the states. I remember speaking with one person during a demonstration who said that the methods for keeping notes were, quote, their own, and that no one could understand them even if they taught them to the whole team. They were almost laughing about the method, in fact, taking pride in the intricacies of their reporting and record keeping. And this is exacerbated when you consider that everybody manages their own regions. Needless to say, their approach is probably not going to make you the most popular person on your team. Our goal is to help you be invaluable to your team, as well as drive the strategy for your team forward. As government affairs is such a mobile, transient role, institutional knowledge and keeping detailed records is more important than ever. Consider this. What if a team member leaves your team in the middle of an upcoming project or at a critical time in your organization? Do you have a single system of record for the work we're doing, as well as a notes and workflow? We're now going to show you how to move your organization towards proactively collaborating and building a sustainable workflow for keeping a single system of record. So the biggest question is, where are you currently keeping your notes? The top answers that I tend to hear more often in demonstrations to potential FiscalNote customers is either, A, on my iPhone notes app section, potentially just a quick email to myself and keep them categorized in a folder, or C, the most traditional method is a handwritten notebook. These are all fine for certain things, but when it comes to creating an entire state session strategy, they aren't going to cut it when you have to record names, contact information, detailed records of conversations and interactions with key stakeholders at a rapid pace for your internal stakeholders. In addition, using any of the above mentioned tools, how are you going to index any of them for searching across your team? How are you going to be able to search someone's email inbox when they're trying to look for your notes in a notebook? With FiscalNote, you don't have to worry about losing your notes or forget that the next task, which may be of critical importance. Simply log into FiscalNote, find the legislator,
piece of legislation or regulation you want to look into and start writing. You can tag your colleagues also on the platform to start a running conversation with them, to keep them informed of your current operations or efforts. Bring team members into the fold by showing them the amount of work you're doing on a specific issue on behalf of your organization. No team member has to be an island, and you certainly never have to be in the upcoming month. With the notes being taken with just a few simple clicks, it's equally important to be able to record meetings and committee hearings as well. As mentioned in the earlier slide, @tagging is an effective way to collaborate across your team, but it can also be an important way for yourself to see the flow of information and the greater issue at hand. By linking your interactions with bills, legislators, and committees, you can see the history of your work, the impact it has made, and what you need to continue to focus on or divert attention from. You can use FiscalNote as your calendar and single source of information to drive your organization's agenda. Finally, with so much of your role being networking and interacting at a client-facing level, the ability to record the names and contact information of key stakeholders is truly critical. The people that you are interfacing with are some of the most important people in your line of work, so it's critical that you are able to keep tabs on them. Keep these contacts for your team to be able to achieve your goals in 2018 state sessions. The time is now to build your network, and with FiscalNote's GRM, you're able to record who you've met with, why, when, under what circumstances, if they may be a friend or foe. You'll then be able to report on these interactions, see the impact they have made in your organization's bottom line, and basically if these relationships are worth continuing and whether you should potentially double down on them. And to show you how another team has been able to move from a reactive to proactive position by utilizing FiscalNote, I wanted to put this quote from Matthew Hawley at DentaQuest. By implementing FiscalNote's GRM, Matthew and his team were able to create a totally scalable and repeatable process for his entire team to follow. Matthew has actually spoken at our annual reInvent Influence Summit and has described many times the impact that FiscalNote has made on his team throughout the years. With that, I wanted to turn it back over to Lillian, who will explain the final roadblock holding teams back. Lillian?
Thanks, Mark. So there's too much information to handle sometimes, and many times collaborating is increasingly difficult. But at the end of state sessions, how are you able to prove results? Many people, specifically clients that I work with, have found that proving ROI can be the most difficult, intangible thing to accomplish at the end of a legislative or regulatory battle session. The traditional cost center view of a government affairs department is a difficult tag to shake off. If we pause for a second and think about other departments in any organization, from sales and marketing or membership services to human resources, they now share their accomplishments with highly detailed data-driven reports. Yet in a government affairs department, it's still quite difficult to quantify what is being achieved and how it's being accomplished. I'm now going to show you how FiscalNote can help prove your ROI to executives, as well as to even your own team members. Reporting is the key component of measuring impact and proving ROI. When consulting with government affairs professionals, it's been really amazing to hear how many of them discuss how much time is spent creating reports to prove value to trade association members or executive teams. A modern government affairs team needs to be able to share information among executives in data-driven formats that they are used to consuming from other departments. They also need to do this quickly, and having all the information managed in a centralized resource means that's actually possible. FiscalNote allows for you and your team to speak the same language with modern and enhanced reporting. You can easily create highly customizable reports from your watch lists to highlight bills you're following and actions you're taking on policy issues. Once you've created a report you like for one or many of your watch lists, the next time you want to send it, all you have to do is click refresh, and it's going to update all of the information with new bills you've added and any actions or notes that have since happened. You can even decide what type of report you'd like to create in the Build Your Own Report modal. These options include a weekly legislative update, which is a pre-made template that you can edit, or a custom report, where you can add elements like graphs, maps, and text to create your own template. Reaching out to legislators, as we've seen in earlier slides, can be exponentially made easier by using FiscalNote's proprietary analytics. But what if you need to actually engage these legislators and see how effective your messaging can be? FiscalNote's mailing list feature allows you to create, store, and export lists of legislators and their staff, so you can take action on important issues in the state and Congress. For state teams, you can easily create email lists of legislators by filtering down to party, chamber, committee, and committee position. With FiscalNote, you'll be able to also see how well your messaging has done to influence legislative outcomes your team has committed to achieving. For our final client testimonial, I wanted to point out Daryl Smith of the International Window Film Association's thoughts on FiscalNote. In his quote, he mentions how his membership is always looking for the government affairs team to provide the leadership and focus for the organization. With FiscalNote, Daryl is able to rest easy knowing that his membership can be proud of the work he and his team are doing, as well as the ability to move their government strategy from a reactive to a proactive stance. The importance of being able to prove value to your membership as well as executives within your organization is critical to running a modern, powerful state session strategy.
Thanks, Lillian. So to recap briefly, FiscalNote today showed you how to move your organization from a reactive to proactive position for upcoming state sessions by combating three key roadblocks. One, the volume and complexity of bills and issues to focus on. Two, the lack of collaboration across states and teams. And three, the inability to prove ROI to your team and both internal and external stakeholders. We showed you how FiscalNote's GRM is the primary tool that state government affairs professionals are using to enact results in 2018 through our product feature descriptions throughout the presentation. As governmental issues are beginning earlier and earlier, it's critical for individuals and organizations to be able to cover more ground by turning to technology and implementing best-in-class resources such as FiscalNote. Now, at this point, we'd like to enter into the question and answer component of the webinar. We'll be answering questions in the order that they were submitted. We'll be doing personal outreach to see if you have any outstanding questions or if we can provide any more insight into today's presentation about how FiscalNote can be used to build a modern government affairs strategy, as well as help you move from a reactive to proactive stance for upcoming sessions. So with that, let me just gather everything and we'll get started with the questions. Okay. So the first question I have here is, did FiscalNote acquire voter voice? Mark, how about you take that one?
Yes, certainly. So we did recently acquire Voter Voice, who some of you may be familiar with, the grassroots advocacy platform. We've had the pleasure of working with clients across a variety of industries, many of them from the early days of FiscalNote, and they've really been instrumental in driving the company forward in terms of how do we make our products better. And one of the questions that we would often receive was regarding advocacy campaigns. So we thought about developing that internally, but we recognized that Voter Voice already had a very robust system, and so we did actually go ahead and acquire them this year, and we are in the early stages of merging those two organizations together. But there's going to be a tremendous, holistic solution that can take legislation from cradle to grave once both of those companies are fully merged.
Great. All right, let me take a look at the second question here. All right, so how do I speak with someone about learning more about FiscalNote? I can definitely answer that one. So actually, if you go to our website, FiscalNote.com, on our website at the top of every page is a contact us button. And I'm also going to, in the next slide, give kind of a more detailed definition of what that is. But you can actually go to the website and request a demonstration of FiscalNote at any time, and we'll respond very quickly with the ability to speak to you about giving you more of a tailored presentation as to what this would look like for your organization. And then the last question I have right here is, how long does it take to set FiscalNote up? Lillian, how about you take that one?
Sure, yeah. So we have experience setting up really small single state organizations all the way to massive corporations with a kind of global rollout. So given that state sessions are coming up, we have an expedited process to get folks up and running. So it can really take, we can turn on your account within 24 hours, and then we can get the team up and running in a couple of days or weeks. But knowing that state sessions are just around the corner, we're going to make every effort to ensure the new folks that are joining us across December and January are ready to go as soon as they need to be.
Fantastic. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier with the question, we invite everyone on this call to learn more about FiscalNote. So I'm leaving my own personal contact information for you all to schedule a presentation of FiscalNote's GRM. And in addition, on our website, as I mentioned, we also have a contact us form on every page when you hit the button for you to fill out a request to get a personalized presentation tailored to you and your organization's needs. And with that, we want to thank everyone for their attendance today. We will be hosting another webinar in the coming months, and we will update you as soon as our speakers are confirmed. I want to thank Mark and Elaine for presenting today, and I also want to thank you all very much for attending. We look very, very much forward to speaking with you all again. Thank you so much.